Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. Today I'm going to talk about the latest of what I'm hearing with when sports could return in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. The New Orleans Saints making some news that I wanted to discuss. Sports rewatches that were on last night and are going to be on tonight. 2015 MLB ReDraft and my top 10 artists of the calendar year 2017. All right, we'll start with a little bit of chatter of what I'm hearing. The NFL, I heard the latest from ESPN's Adam Schefter. He said it on SportsCenter that the schedule could come out at some point next month. And he doesn't know if / when they're going to start. And I mean, if they'll start on time or if they'll start later. He said he heard rumblings that it could start in mid-October and they'll eliminate bye weeks and the Super Bowl will be on February 28th, which would be 10 months from today, ironically enough, down in probably Tampa because that was supposed to be the host city this year. And then they also eliminate the Pro Bowl, which that is probably the least enticing all-star game of any of the 4 professional sports. I know NBA, they played for charity this past year, which is pretty cool. I think baseball and hockey should do that as well in future all-star games for those respective sports. So they would eliminate the Pro Bowl, eliminate byes, and then they would start up like October 15th or something like that. I think that was the date that they would say. I think that falls on a Thursday, and it does. That would make sense because October 15th, they would have the opening game that Thursday night, and then the first football Sunday would be October 18th, which would be a Sunday. And then they'd go... Week 7 would be the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So I guess they'd still have the Thanksgiving games, but that would be in, let's do the math here. Week 6, that would be weird. So it'd be 7 weeks through November, 11 weeks through December, and then 16 weeks through January. So week 17 would be January 31st. The wild card round would be February 7th, 6th, and 7th. Division rounds would be 13th and 14th of February. So you have playoff games on Valentine's Day in the second round of the playoffs, and then the NFC and AFC championship games would be on February 21st, and then the Super Bowl without that bye week would be February 28th. So that would make a lot of sense to me. I would be on board with that because, yeah, we would have not really a full NFL season. It's a shortened season because of no byes and no Pro Bowl. And the only byes that a team would have would be the 1 seeds in this new playoff format. And then, in theory, you'd have a shorter off season in 2021. And then you'd have maybe free agency a little bit later, like March 31st. And then they announced today that the draft of 2021 would take place April 29th through May 1st in Cleveland. So there's a little bit of controversy there because you would have the draft and the Kentucky Derby going on at the same time in 2021, assuming that they'd still have Kentucky Derby on May 1st of 2021, because the Kentucky Derby is actually being moved to September. I believe it's September 12th is the new Kentucky Derby date. And if that NFL thing happens, or the season starts on October 15th, then it wouldn't conflict with the NFL weekend. But the only thing it would conflict with would be college football, which is supposed to start on September 5th. And the season would start... Actually, the season would technically start like the first football of Saturday of college would be September 5th, where it's like a bunch of games, but like the prior week would be August 29th and 30th. They would have a couple games that weekend, maybe like 3 or 4 games that would be on ESPN or other random channels. And not really enticing games, like maybe like one enticing game like last year in that they would like to call week 0. We had Miami versus Florida, which was a really good game between the in-state rivals there, two prominent programs from the ACC and the SEC, respectively. So it's interesting to see how this plays out. And college football, there's a lot of talk of having the season in the second semester. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they will actually have their season start on time, and they're going to start with, like, fans in, like, maybe every, like, other seat, perhaps, and then, like, maybe into the fall, like October, November is when they'd have fans in the stands again, because a lot of schools are intending to have their fall semesters. Dabo Sweeney is very optimistic about the season starting on time, and I agree with Dabo. He's a half-glass full person, and so am I. So I actually do think we're going to have a full college football season, but the twist is that the fan seating is going to be a little different, obviously. They're going to spread out fans a little bit, and then see how that works out and see how things are by then, and then they will eventually go to with fans. The NBA, it's looking more likely and likely that there will be a continuation of the NBA season, and that it's very good. At first, there was those rumors that it was just going to be the playoffs, and now there's even wrinkles that they're going to finish the regular season and at least have every team get to 70 games, because the players get their full payments, apparently, or most of their payments after 70 games. So, for example, I think the Mavericks have like 67 games. They don't have to play 3 more games, but the Lakers have 70 or 63 games, so they would have to play 7 more games. But the big losers in this, if the regular season comes back, are teams like the New York Knicks and the Chicago Bulls and the Golden State Warriors, teams that are obviously lottery teams this season that have to come back and play a couple more games. But what I think they should do is that I think that they should put the lottery teams in a tournament for fun, and the winner of that tournament gets to have the number 1 pick in the draft instead of having a lottery. I think that would be pretty cool, so you won't have teams tanking. Or do a tournament and the winner gets some sort of prize or something. It doesn't have to be the number 1 overall pick. I love that idea. Maybe the winning team gets to donate money to a charity of their choice, or COVID-19 recoverings or something like that. I think they're going to come up with something clever, and I think the NHL should do the same. I think the NHL should continue their regular season as well, because there's a lot of teams in both conferences that are very close to the playoff line. And then the lottery teams, those 15 lottery teams in the NHL should do like a tournament too. And maybe that first team that misses the playoffs in the NHL, like the quote-unquote best lottery team, gets to have a bye in that tournament, per se. So, and then the other 2 leagues, the NBA and the NHL, would have their regular playoffs to determine a champion, and then the lottery teams play in a tournament, and maybe the winner. I love the idea of playing for the number 1 pick, and then the runner-up gets the number 2 pick, and et cetera, and then do the rest of the picks based on the records in terms of where they were eliminated. But if not that, then maybe the winning team of that lottery team tournament gets a prize and donates it to COVID-19 recoverants or a charity of their choice. So I think the NBA and NHL will come up with something smart, and fans around the world will embrace what they're going to do. And in baseball, we talked about it a lot yesterday about the the league in different states and then possibly doing the postseason in November and in their home stadiums for the teams that make the postseason. So it should be interesting to see what happens. And I think we'll know more next month on sports' returns and whatnot. And obviously, the other can of worms that this opens is that this could change the long-term outlook of sports calendars. But we'll get into that another day on the show. All right, the Saints made some news over the weekend and yesterday. They're reportedly close to signing Jameis Winston to a one-year deal. To me, they are doing that to see maybe they can put him in the Teddy Bridgewater situation. And they're doing that to see what kind of value they can have. Or maybe they're signing him so maybe somebody gets injured in the preseason and they can trade him for something. Kind of like what the Jets did a couple years ago, signing Teddy Bridgewater. And then they wound up drafting Sam Darnold. And then they traded him to New Orleans, but Drew Brees wasn't injured. So maybe they sign Jameis, and then maybe somebody gets hurt in the preseason, and then they trade him. Or Drew Brees gets hurt in the preseason, which I don't think the Saints want, obviously. And he'd be their starter. And then they extend Taysom Hill to a 2-year contract, 2 years, $21 million, so he gets paid. They're high on him as a quarterback, and he's pretty much their utility player. Like, he can play anywhere, and Sean Payton loves the kid, and he's made some big plays for the Saints last year and even the year before. They do some Wildcat stuff with him, which is pretty neat. So, I believe they put, like, a second-round tender on him. If a team traded for him, they'd have to give up a second-round pick. But the Saints got a deal done with him, and he's there to stay for a couple of more seasons. All right, now I want to talk about some old sports games that were on TV last night and ones that are going on tonight. Last night, ESPN re-aired a classic Cowboys-Bills Monday night game. Tony Romo, I believe, was in his second year in the league. Marshawn Lynch was on the Bills. The Bills had a big lead. The Cowboys were about to tie the game. They missed the 2-point conversion, but they get the onside kick. And then they drive down the field. Romo and Terrell Owens, Jason Witten, that offense drives down the field. Nick Folk initially kicks a game winner, but the Bills coach calls timeout, so he freezes him. Then he kicks it again, and he was a rookie at the time, Nick Folk, and kicks the game winner, and then the Cowboys remained undefeated, and the Bills were just a mediocre team that year. Tonight, ESPN is re-airing 2003 ALCS Game 7, Red Sox-Yankees, October 16, 2003, famously known as the Aaron Boone game, the walk-off homer to send the Yankees to the 2003 World Series. Aaron Boone's father, Bob Boone, I believe, was in the booth for that game with Joe Buck and Tim McCarver. And obviously the Yankees did not win the World Series that year. They lost to the Marlins and Josh Beckett that year. But this was one of the classic games. The Red Sox had a lead. They bring Pedro in out of the bullpen, and then Pedro, it's funny because he's always owned the Yankees, and then he fell apart in Game 7, and then the Red Sox manager wound up getting fired because of that, and then they hired Terry Francona, and the rest is history. So, a really classic MLB game on tonight at 7 o'clock. They're re-airing the virtual draft on ESPN2 and the SEC Network. MSG Network in New York is re-airing Linsanity games from the Jeremy Lin era. They re-aired his first couple games. And then tonight they're actually re-airing a couple more as well. That was a fun era for the Knicks there for a little while. Old Stanley Cup final games from the 70s on NBCSN tonight. Bruins Flyers 1974 Game 1. And then a regular season game between the Penguins and the Capitals from December 11th of 2006. So, young Crosby against young Ovechkin. And obviously those guys are still in the league today and still playing at a high level. NFL Network tonight has on Patriots-Chiefs AFC title game from 2018 season. It was obviously in 2019 in the calendar year. Obviously the D Ford offsides. And then the Patriots take the lead on the go-ahead touchdown by Rex Burkhead. And then the Chiefs drive down the field. Harrison Butker makes the kick. Then we go to overtime. And then Brady and the Pats get it done and move on to the Super Bowl. MLB Network going on right now as we speak. The Homer Bailey no-hitter, Giants-Reds from 2013. And then the Max Scherzer no-hitter, Nats at the Mets from 2015. Meaningless regular season game for the Mets that they were no-hitting. That was the year the Mets went to the World Series. The Nationals were a big underachiever that year. Matt Williams lost his job. And then the Angels combined no-hitter from July of last year after the passing of Tyler Skaggs is going to be on tonight on the MLB Network as well. So a couple of old good games there for baseball. The re-airings of these games really do bring out some memories. And then the other day they re-aired Virginia Tech, Ohio State 2014. Obviously, Virginia Tech was the only team to beat Ohio State that year. That was the year that Braxton Miller was hurt, then it was J.T. Barrett, and then J.T. Barrett got hurt, then it was Cardell Jones, and then they wound up winning the title with Michael Thomas, Ezekiel Elliott, and that really talented team. And then 2004 NBA Finals will be on tomorrow night, Game 5 between the Lakers and the Pistons. That was the Pistons title. And then 2014 Game 5, Heat Spurs. So that was when Kawhi won his first title and first Finals MVP. So two game clinchers or series clinchers of the NBA Finals will be aired tomorrow night. Now I want to do my 2015 MLB redraft. This is interesting. A lot of big names in this draft. A lot of these guys are all-star players. I did this, I think, 2 years ago, and I had a different person as my number one overall pick in the redraft. But boy, has a lot changed since then. So here we go, my 2015 MLB redraft. Number 1, Arizona Diamondbacks, Walker Buehler. Obviously, Buehler's a stud on the Dodgers, the ace of their staff. He would have been the ace of the Diamondback staff right now. He is probably the pitcher that a lot of people are going to pick for the National League Cy Young this year. He's on the best team, arguably in all of baseball. It's between the Dodgers and the Yankees, in my mind, for the best team in the league. But boy, if the Diamondbacks franchise outlook would be a lot different if they had Walker Buehler. Instead, they drafted Dansby Swanson, who they famously dealt away for Shelby Miller, and they got ripped up at the time of that deal because Swanson was thought out to be this can't-miss prospect, but it turns out he really wasn't. He isn't a bust per se, but he's not what the Diamondbacks and Braves thought. So maybe the Diamondbacks knew something when they traded him away, but they just traded him for the wrong pitcher. Astros at number 2 go with Alex Bregman, so no do-over here as they take their guy in Bregman. Obviously one of the star players in the league today. He probably should have won the MVP last year over Mike Trout, but I think that he didn't win. My conspiracy theory is that he didn't win because the Astros cheating rumors were already out at the time of the voting, so he got punished for that. The Rockies at number 3 go with Mike Soroka, who had a breakout rookie year last year for the Braves, making the All-Star team. He's the ace of the Braves staff. He would be the ace of the Rockies staff right now as well. Instead, the Rockies go with Brendan Rodgers, who I don't think has seen a game in the big leagues yet. The Rangers at number 4 go with Paul DeJong. Paul DeJong really has emerged as one of the best shortstops in the National League over the last couple of years. The Cardinals got a steal at where they got him. If the Rangers had drafted him, maybe they would have had different decisions in their front office and who they could possibly trade. Rougned Odor's probably not on that team, or maybe they deal DeYoung. Who knows? But instead, the Rangers went with Dylan Tate, who they traded away to the Yankees in the Carlos Beltran deal, and the Yankees traded Tate away in the Zach Britton deal. 5, the Houston Astros go with Andrew Benintendi. So Benintendi's obviously an established big leaguer. He probably has not lived up to expectations. Well, it's Boston, and there's always expectations in Boston if you're a first-round pick, big market. But he's still a solid player, and probably was the best option on the board for the Astros to go with. Instead, they go with Kyle Tucker, who really hasn't lived up to expectations in the big leagues either. The Minnesota Twins at 6 go with Austin Riley, someone who was really productive as a rookie last year at the Braves. I think he'll see a lot of time at third base this season for Atlanta, assuming we do have a season. He certainly would have been a good fit on Minnesota. And if they had him on board, they probably don't sign Josh Donaldson. So instead, the Twins go with Tyler J., who was a bust. The Red Sox at 7 go with Dansby Swanson. So with Andrew Benintendi off the board, they go with Swanson, who has not lived up to expectations with the Braves. This guy was thought out to be some superstar player. He really hasn't been that. He's just been an average shortstop at best, really. I mean, he had some flashes, but not consistent flashes. The Red Sox probably would have traded him away because they have Xander Bogaerts at shortstop, and they obviously love him. And Xander Bogaerts is much better than Dansby Swanson. So they probably would have dealt Swanson away and maybe the Chris Sale package for to the White Sox. And instead, the Red Sox go with Benintendi, who I mentioned before. White Sox, they go with Brandon Lowe. Brandon Lowe had a great year last year with the Rays, made the All-Star team. He was a Rookie of the Year candidate, but he did not win it. That obviously went to Houston's Yordan Alvarez. Well, that was a really good player, and I think the Rays, he's a part of their future. And this would have been interesting had the White Sox taken him. Maybe they deal him in a win-now package, perhaps. This was in 2015, and at the time, Todd Frazier was still a member of the Reds, so maybe they deal him to Cincinnati for Todd Frazier, but who knows? Or maybe they keep him around, and he's a second base or third baseman for them. So who knows with him. And instead, the White Sox took Carson Fulmer, who has not been a consistent pitcher. The Cubs at number 9 go with Brendan Rodgers, who falls to them. The Rockies are still high on this kid. He'll probably be their second baseman this year. I do not think they'll trade Trevor Story. They love him. They extended him for a reason. Nolan Arenado, I think, is possibly going to be traded this year or next year. So maybe they'll put Brendan Rodgers at third base rather than second base. But yeah, the Rockies are obviously a team that's rebuilding. They'll probably keep Brendan Rodgers in the fold. But say if Rodgers is on the Cubs, maybe some of their decisions are different. Maybe they do trade Javier Baez because they almost traded him a few times. Now it's like a good decision by the Cubs not to trade Baez because he broke out as a player the last couple of years. He was just a late bloomer. That happens in sports. You see it all the time. Eli Manning was a late bloomer. You had a lot of guys in sports that were late bloomers. Phillip Rivers was a late bloomer in the NFL. It's mostly NFL quarterbacks that are late bloomers, but you see other late bloomers in sports as well. Stephen Curry was technically a late bloomer as well. So, same with Javier Baez. He was a late bloomer, and maybe they trade Baez and Brendan Rodgers is the shortstop of the Cubs right now, or maybe they deal Rodgers to the Yankees for Aroldis Chapman or something like that, or they deal him to the Royals for Wade Davis. Because those are two trades for the Cubs that are major losses right now in my mind. Even though they won with Chapman, he helped them win the World Series. Absolutely, but they'd much rather have, in my opinion, Gleyber Torres and Jorge Soler right now than Kyle Schwarber and Ian Happ. That's just the reality of the situation. And no, and they have Schwarber and Happ who really haven't lived up to expectations. Phillies at number 10. Oh, by the way, the Cubs went with Ian Happ at the 9th spot. I just mentioned Ian Happ by name, and then that's who they took with that pick. Phillies at 10 go with K. Brian Hayes. K. Brian Hayes is a really interesting prospect in the Pittsburgh Pirates system. Top 100 prospect on MLB.com. I think he could very well be playing on the Pirates this year. He is very high upside, a lot of power. So maybe he's their third baseman of the future. And instead, the Phillies took a major bust here with Cornelius Randolph. The Cincinnati Reds at 11 go with Harrison Bader, who is a fourth outfielder on the Cardinals, but sometimes plays a lot because of the depth of the Cardinals. So he's an overqualified fourth outfielder. That's what he basically is. Not a bad player to have on your team. He is a good defensive player. He would have been a nice fit on Cincinnati, a nice, cute little building block for them. Instead, they go with Tyler Stevenson, who's a young catcher in their system, who they're still high on. 12, the Miami Marlins go with Ian Happ. So Ian Happ falls to them at 12. Ian Happ is somebody that showed a lot of promise his first couple years in the big leagues. And last year, he spent most of the year in AAA working on the strikeouts and bringing them down. And he'll probably be playing the majority of this season on the Cubs and playing a lot of center field for them. And he certainly would be starting on the Miami Marlins right now for sure. And instead they go with Josh Naylor, who they wound up trading away to the Padres in a deal that netted them, I believe it was Fernando Rodney. That was a bad trade at the time. I killed the Marlins for it because I loved Josh Naylor, and it looks like I'm right about that. 13, the Tampa Bay Rays go with Kyle Tucker. So Kyle Tucker falls from 5 to 13 in the redraft. Kyle Tucker is someone that put up big numbers in the minors and had high expectations coming into the majors, but he really hasn't done anything. He's kind of looked like a bust. And if he really doesn't pan out to what the Astros think, then this is a miss by the Astros. But they kind of do get a pass because they did wind up winning, and then everyone's like, they don't deserve a pass, they cheated, yada yada. But right now, this does not look like a good pick by the Astros, and the expectations were too high, it looks like. Kyle Tucker would have been someone that I think the Rays probably would have packaged in a deal. Maybe they trade him to the Marlins for that reliever they got, Richards, that I killed Tampa Bay at the time because they traded one of their highly regarded prospects to Miami. But maybe they deal Tucker there, and then everybody's killing Tampa for dealing Tucker because Tucker's highly regarded and yada yada. But hey, who knows? Maybe a change of scenery can do Kyle Tucker wonders. I think there's a chance that he's traded in a package this year if there is a such thing as a trade deadline this year, and the Astros need a starting pitcher, and they trade him to, let's say, San Francisco in a package that nets Houston back Johnny Cueto or something like that. All right. And instead, the Rays went with Garrett Whitley, who was a bust. 14, Atlanta goes with Willie Calhoun. They get a steal at this spot with Calhoun, somebody that the Dodgers are very high on, and they dealt him to Texas in the Yu Darvish deal. Calhoun's been like a utility guy for the Rangers, DH, left field, right field. Actually was a second baseman by trade. Has a lot of power. I think he's a breakout candidate for the Rangers this year. And if the Braves took him, that would have been a steal, although the Braves probably would have dealt him away maybe to the Tigers for Shane Green or in another possible trade that they did within the last couple of years. Instead, the Braves went with Colby Allard, who they did wind up dealing in a trade to Texas for Chris Martin. Number 15, the Milwaukee Brewers, they go with Scott Kingery. So Scott Kingery falls to them at 15. Kingery's a good player, good utility guy for Philly. Plays a little bit of second base, a little bit of third base. Fast guy, good defender. Has some power surges here and there. He probably would play a little third base for the Brewers because, let's say they still wind up drafting Keston Hiura down the road. Although I had Hiura going somewhere else in my redraft when I did that draft. They probably play him at third, or maybe if they don't take Hiura down the road, they play him at second. So Kingery would have been a good little utility piece for Milwaukee. Instead, they go with Trenton Clark, who was a bust. 16, the New York Yankees go with Jordan Hicks, a really above-average reliever for the St. Louis Cardinals. He did make some spot starts in the past for the Cardinals, I believe. He would have been, I think, in that Chad Green opener role for them. Somebody that gets a lot of strikeouts. I know the Yankees are an organization that loves strikeouts, and they like the power arm. So this would have been a fine selection by them, as Hicks is the best reliever in this draft class. And instead, the Yankees went with James Kaprielian, who wound up getting injured a couple times, and the Yankees wound up dealing him away in the package that netted the Yankees Sonny Gray at the 2017 trade deadline. 17, the Cleveland Indians go with Kevin Newman, who was a solid player on the Pirates. Shortstop. He was highly regarded a while ago, but his stock has went down. But he's somebody that hits for average. I think he's somebody that will get better in the big leagues. I think he could be a breakout guy for Pittsburgh this year, potentially. But the trick here at the Indians is that they already have Francisco Lindor. So maybe they put Newman at second base or third base, or they trade him. And let's say the package that netted them Brad Hand from the Padres at the time, or Andrew Miller from the Yankees in 2016, maybe. So they could have had options there. 18, the San Francisco Giants. Oh, by the way, the Indians with 17 took Brady Aiken, who did not pan out. San Francisco at 18 goes with Josh Naylor, who falls to them to the 18th spot. Naylor saw some big league time with the Padres last year, hit for some power. The Padres are obviously a team that has a lot of assets. I think Naylor is someone that they'll probably trade because they already have Eric Hosmer at first base. So they'll probably deal Naylor away in a possible deal for a starting pitcher. Maybe they deal him to Detroit for in a Matt Floyd or Michael Fulmer package or something like that. Or San Francisco for Cueto or Samardzija. Or let's think of another starting pitcher that could be available for trade this summer. Maybe one of those Mariners guys. Tajon Walker, Mariners brought back on a 1-year deal. Maybe he has some value and they flip Naylor to Seattle for Tajon Walker or something like that. So the Padres have options in Naylor. I think that Naylor would have been a good piece for the Giants. That maybe the Giants deal him away in a possible trade as well. Maybe the Cincinnati for Scooter Gennett. If he was with San Francisco at the time. Instead, the Giants go with Phil Bickford, who they traded away to Milwaukee in the one of those trades. I think that was when they got Will Smith. The Pirates at 19 go with Christian Stewart, who is currently playing on the Detroit Tigers as their DH. Showed some flashes in the big leagues, maybe a breakout candidate this year. It would have been tricky with the Pirates. Do they put him in left field? Do they trade him somewhere potentially down the road? Maybe do they deal him in the Rays deal that netted them Chris Archer? Who knows? But Christian Stewart does have a lot of power and he has a lot of potential. And in Pittsburgh instead went with Kevin Newman, who I talked about a couple picks ago. Oakland at 20 goes with Ryan Mountcastle, someone who's an Orioles prospect. I believe he was 97th on the top 100 on MLB.com. The Orioles third baseman of the future. I think that if he plays in the big leagues this year, he will show a lot of promise for Baltimore. And he really would have had I don't know if he would have had a role on Oakland because they obviously have Matt Chapman there. And we all know Matt Chapman's a superstar. So maybe they deal him in a trade that nets them something else. Who knows? Instead, Oakland goes to Richie Martin, who was not good. Royals at 21, I have them going with Colby Allard. So Allard falls to them at 21. Allard is someone that was a Braves prospect, showed a little promise with the Braves, and they dealt him to the Rangers for Chris Martin. And at the time, I thought the Rangers stole him, but I think that's a TBD on that deal. So the Royals land themselves a potential middle of the rotation guy here with Allard in this redraft. Instead, they went with Ash Russell, who hadn't worked out. The Tigers at 22 go with Tyler Stevenson, the Reds catcher, minor league catcher, I should say. I still think this kid has potential. The Tigers have a good catching prospect, Jake Rogers. So maybe at the time they draft Stevenson, and maybe in 2016, and they were kind of in the race in 2016. Maybe they deal him in a trade, or they deal the other catcher Rogers. So they'd have two catching prospects there if they took Stevenson. Instead, they went with Beau Burrows, who's not bad. Cardinals at 23 go with Tristan McKenzie, somebody who was highly touted not long ago, a top 100 prospect on MLB.com, and now he's the number 9 prospect in the Indian system. That guy really had a fall, and that's because of injuries. I still think this guy has a chance to be really good. So the Cardinals get themselves a steal in my mind here, and instead they went with Nick Plummer. 24, the Dodgers go with Andrew Suarez with Walker Buehler off the board. Obviously, he was the best player in this draft. They go with Andrew Suarez, who is a reliever / spot starter. Showed some flashes here and there. Can get guys out. So maybe he would have been a long man for the Dodgers. And instead, they went with Buehler, who turned out to be some stud. The Orioles at 25 go with Patrick Sandoval, someone who the Angels took later in this draft. Similar situation as Suarez, that long reliever / spot starter, can occasionally get guys out. He probably would have been trade bait if he was on the Orioles, or maybe they use him and keep him around. And instead, the Orioles went with DJ Stewart, who did not pan out. In 26, the Angels go with Carson Fulmer, the last guy left in this redraft. Fulmer, somebody that showed some potential with the White Sox, but really hasn't lived up to expectations. His ERA is really high. He gives up a lot of home runs. So he probably isn't the guy that the White Sox thought, but who knows? Sometimes guys are late bloomers. Maybe he would have worked out elsewhere. And instead, the Angels go with Taylor Ward. All right, now I'm going to do my top 10 artists of 2017. I don't have any honorable mentions. I'm just going to go right to the list. 10th, I have Imagine Dragons. They had a good 2017, in my opinion. They're obviously a really good band. I believe they had an album that year as well. Yes, they did. It called Evolve. And they had 3 singles off of that album in that count in the year 2017. Believer, Thunder, and Whatever It Takes. Number 9. The Chainsmokers. They had the album Memories Do Not Open, 3 hit songs off that album, Paris, Something Like That, and Honest. in 2017. 8th place, Kendrick Lamar. He had 3 hits that year, all off his, some of his albums, most notably the album Damn. Humble, Loyalty, and Love were the 3 big hits. 7th place, I had Bruno Mars. Obviously, the big album 24K Magic came out in 2016, but a lot of the hits came out in 2017. 3 of them, That's What I Like, Versace on the Floor, and Chunky. 6th place, I have Post Malone, who had a good 2017. 2 singles from his album Stoney came out in 2017. Congratulations, and I Fall First. And 2 singles off his album Beer Bongs and Bentleys, noted as Rockstar, and Candy Paint were the 2 singles off of that album. 6th place, or is it 5th? 5th place, my bad. The Weeknd, who is a rapper that had a good 2017. His album Starboy came out in 2016, but 4 singles off it came out in 2017. Reminder, Rockin', Die For You, and Secrets. 4th place, Drake. Drake had a really good year. His album Views came out in 2016, and then a mixtape album came out in 2017 called More Life, and 4 singles came from it: Passion Fruit, Free Smoke, Portland, and Glow. And then Scary Hours ended up coming out in 2018, and then the actual album Scorpion came out in 2018. He had a bunch of hits in that album, obviously. 3rd place, Ed Sheeran, who had a great 2017. He had a bunch of songs come out off the Divide album in that year. Castle on the Hill, Shape of You, Galway Girl, and Perfect were the 4 big songs from 2017 that came off the Divide album. 2nd place, Taylor Swift. We all know Taylor Swift is a huge star. She had a big 2017. Reputation came out that year. 4 hit songs came out in that calendar year. Look What You Made Me Do, Ready For It, Endgame, and New Year's Day all came out in 2017 off that album. And my number 1 artist of 2017, Future. A hip-hop artist, rapper. A lot of singles he came out with that year: Draco, Mask Off, and Extra Love off the album Future. And then Hendrix, the other album, Selfish, Pie, Incredible, and You the Baddest. And then he had an album mixtape called Super Slimy, and a song called Paddock Water came out. So that's 8 singles for Future that came out in the calendar year 2017. All right, that's it for today's show. I'll be back tomorrow with the latest coronavirus, sports plan to return news, or any other news related to COVID-19. Any other sports news I have, I'll bring it to you. I'll talk more about rewatches. I'll have an NBA redraft either tomorrow or Thursday, most likely Thursday, but I could very well do it tomorrow. Masked Singer will preview the episode tomorrow. And don't forget, Millionaire is now Thursday nights, so we'll preview Millionaire on Thursday's show, and then we'll preview Masked Singer tomorrow. And top 10 albums of 2017, that will be on Thursday's podcast. Hope you guys have a great day, everyone.